Got head coach Darris Nichols from Radford University. Pumped to have you on, man. As always, the way we kick off the show, one, appreciate you joining us. And two is give us a wild story. Give us something funny. Give us something interesting. It could have been something you experienced from your playing days or something you've experienced now that you've been in coaching for several years. But yeah, share something. Again, appreciate you joining us and share something humorous, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Um, I'm not going. I'm not going to give one for my playing days because that may incriminate myself. So I'll go. Something happened last year. With our staff, and I think when you're in a leadership position, you model behavior.
Right, right.
Good behavior, bad behavior. So we had a situation last year. My strength coach Jennifer Norton, she came to me and she said, "Coach, the guys, they come to the weight room unprepared. Some guys came in, the shoes untied." Eating oatmeal because they had early morning weights.
Right.
Um, so she was just tired of it. And I said, sometimes like this generation, you have to get to them different ways instead of, when we were playing, it was just run them, I'm gonna show them.
Yeah.
I said, okay. I said, you know what? I'm gonna act like them. Like we have workouts later this afternoon. So I said, I'm gonna come, shoes untied, unprepared, come like 30 seconds into when we're about to start and I'm going to be eating a bowl of Fruity Pebbles. So, we keep snacks and food downstairs a lot.
Yeah.
I said, when I'm hungry, I'm going to get these Fruity Pebbles. I haven't had them in a long time. So I walked in eating Fruity Pebbles. We circled up and I was like trying to act like I was unprepared,
Right.
like, kind of like how they were doing. And then they were laughing and doing all this stuff. And I'm like, what's so funny? And they were like, why are you eating cereal? And I said, why are y'all coming in the, weights, eating oatmeal and doing all that stuff unprepared? And I said, why is it funny when I do it, but when you guys do it, it's like acceptable. And
Right,
so
right, right.
they kind of they understand me now, and they understand like when I'm trying to tell them a story or whatever. But sometimes when I do stuff like that, I have to let different people around the department know because if you just walk in and you see
Right,
Fruity Pebbles in the middle of practice, it ain't gonna look right. So
right.
yeah,
AD's looking down like, what the
yeah,
hell is this guy doing?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's too funny.
yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah, appreciate that. Let's just kind of jump in. And I think where I want to kick off too is I'm always curious. I guess like the initial question is like why coaching, right? Like why is it that you wanted to get into coaching? In my experience for, over a decade now, it's like especially guys like you very successful in college, even had like your own like short professional stint is I think a lot of guys think they want to do it
Yeah.
like because
Yeah.
it's familiar, right? Like
Yeah.
they've played all their
Right.
life. And so they're like, I see it a lot with like football players, like, yeah, like I'm just gonna be a football coach. I'm like, do you really, or is it just what's convenient and it's what you think you want to do? So I'm curious, like,
Exactly.
what led you down that journey of like really wanting to
Yeah.
to get into coaching?
First off, as a player, you really don't know what all goes into coaching. Like when you watch coaches and you look at them, you're like, yeah, they go on the road recruiting, but they're always on the computer.
Right.
So just like we were on our computer. Um, I mean, that's what I thought. I was like,
Right, right, right.
so my journey was I thought I was gonna play professional basketball forever. That didn't happen. I played not even a full year, maybe like 5 months in Hungary, and then I blew out my left knee. Had to have microfracture surgery on that. Came back to the States, was rehabbing, then I hurt my other knee.
Oh wow.
And then I was like, I don't, I can't keep just doing knee surgeries trying to make a
Right.
bit of money. I was a rookie, so I wasn't making a ton of money. So all the money that I made, I was basically paying off my surgery. So
Yeah.
I went to Morgantown and I was rehabbing there. And then I was working at a local hotel, valet cars, parking cars. And you got to think, the year before I was a starting point guard. Now I'm
Yeah.
parking cars and everybody's like, man, what are you doing? So, it's kind of like, oh, it's kind of humbling,
Right, all right.
but, I needed money. So, and then I was doing that for a year. And then I was going over watching practice, talking to Bob Huggins, Josh Howard, those guys. And they had a GA spot coming open the next year. And Hugs was like, hey, man, like, you ought to just get in coaching, man. Your knees ain't holding up. I got a GA spot. It's yours if you want it. And I debated it because I wasn't ready to really give up playing.
Right.
I got to see for that 4 year, I got to see what coaching really was, like how much time hanging around hugs late at night, watching film, you know, seeing the hours into it. So it wasn't surprising to me what all went into it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I said I really wanted to coach. But my degree was in sociology. I wanted to be a social worker and help kids. And then I always wanted to stay involved in the game of basketball. And I said, you know what? Basketball coaching, you're helping kids through the game. So I put the two together and then I was like, okay, well, I'll do this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Why do you feel like going back to like when you said like you were valeting cars is you were smart in the terms of like you took the risk, right? I feel like a lot of kids these days
Yeah.
there would be a sense of insecurity there, and it's like I was the man in this city. Now I can't be seen like parking cars. Like
Yeah.
like I'm gonna go do something else or kind of fake it till you make it
Yeah.
type thing. What allowed you to just give you that freedom to kind of say screw it, essentially? And like, I know like you said you needed the money, but could have done anything to make some money, right? Like what
Yeah.
humbled you
Well,
to kind of take that leap?
I needed a job that provided flexibility, but also where I could make money fast. And, I got paid good off tips, you know. So that job was good for me because I could go work in the morning and then the afternoons go over to the basketball facility, do my
Yeah,
rehab, or watch practice. So I wasn't looking at it as like, I mean, at first I was, but I wasn't really looking at it as like, oh man, this is gonna look bad. I'm gonna look like I'm a failure. I thought
right.
that at first, but then I said, okay, well, this is an opportunity where I can make money and also do what I need to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you feel like you have to preach that message now?
Um, I don't have to preach it. I think I share my story. I think a lot of times coaches are scared to be vulnerable or share their scars.
Yeah,
And so that was a hard play. That was a tough spot for me. Just because your identity is so tied into your sport
right,
for a number of years and it was taken away, instantly. It's something that you don't have time to prepare for. And even
right.
when a lot of athletes you see, like even when they know they're getting down to the end of their career, it's still hard to transition out. So when it happens like unexpectedly, it's like, all right, whose couch am I living on?
Right. Yeah, yeah. Back's totally against the wall, like at that point.
Yeah.
I know one thing I wanted to ask, like, so I was watching one of your other interviews. It was the one on like with what drives winning. And
Okay.
one of the things that you were talking about, and it became a conversation, and I'm like highly enlightened by this, is it was the idea of like when players or people start posting and sharing about their past and what
Yeah.
that actually means like for them. Because I know like for me, it's like that is one of like the core things, like telling teams and athletes is like, if there are people talking about their glory days, it means that they're probably not
Yeah.
creating the future that they want right now. It's like they're still stuck in
Exactly.
being the best high school,
Exactly.
being the best middle school recruit. So, how have you
Yeah.
continued to incorporate that, like as your message, or just kind of give your thoughts and share that story as well? Because I think that that's like super powerful
Yeah.
for people to hear.
It's just like some of the posts you see, like it could be it could be a quote, it could be anything. And you take that and if it's something that's about the past, it's usually okay, it's alarming. And so, a lot of coaches say, man, get off social media. You don't need to be on that. They're not getting off. They're
Right.
not. If they get off, they're getting back on.
Right.
So I mean, why not use it as a tool to learn about them? Um, and our staff does a good job of seeing what they like, seeing what they post, understanding what they're going through because a lot of times it does tell a story. And
Yes.
so for us, we tell them, don't. A lot of them are living in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and we believe you should learn from the past. Don't live in it. Learn from it. And it was funny because a lot of times when they post like their old high school highlights in the middle of the season, that means they're not playing or they're not playing well.
Yeah.
And so anytime they post like their old highlights or whatever, our whole staff will call them and check on them and say, "Hey man, are you doing okay?"
Yeah.
And it's funny because one of my other assistants, he posted like some old game clips of him in college playing at Tulsa. And then the guys flipped it on him and they said, "Hey, coach, you all right?"
Yeah,
So
no kidding.
yeah, so we just try to tell them, learn from the past, produce in the present and prepare for the future. So
Yeah.
if you do the later two more than you do the first one I said, then you're usually at peace. But
Hmm.
it's hard to not live in the past.
Yeah, how do you get them? Because that's again, if I had like one theme is I truly believe that like we are the creators of our lives. Like, right? Like we get to control our environment, we get to control our thoughts, we can control our behaviors. We can, I don't want to say we can control, but we need to learn how to manage our emotions because it's very hard to control them like per se. And so how do you get them to
Yeah.
understand as they come in from a teenager basically and leave 21, 22, 23, assuming they stay a few years, right? But how do you get them to understand that like you get to create this? Yes, there is an opportunity here now. Now it's up to you to create the life, the
Yeah.
career, the relationships that you want.
I think we believe in coaching the response harder than the mistake. Um, and I think it starts on the court with that theory, and then we share stories off the court, how,
Yeah.
they go hand in hand. So, for example, I was talking to one of my players yesterday, and I said, "This is because he's new. We have a lot of new guys." And I tell him, I said, "You've had a lot of coaches, and I can tell that have been hard on you about your mistakes." I said, "So you shoot an air ball in our first game, all right, and then you jog back on defense, and you're kind of pouting. I'm taking you out for jogging back on defense and pouting,
Right.
and then you come to the bench and you're pouting because you come out of the game.
Mm.
Then you're never going back in the game." And then you go home after the game and you get a text message, and then somebody says, "Man, I can't believe coach took you out for that air ball." And I'm gonna say, "No, you tell him why coach took you out and didn't put you back in. It's your response."
Right, right, right.
So I think too many coaches focus on the mistake and don't focus on the response as hard as the mistake.
Yeah, how do you build that? Because that takes what you talked about before is it takes a good a bit of connection for them to not just hear it, but actually understand, what you're trying to say. And I just like, yeah, like whatever. We know you really
Yeah,
want the points. You really want the ball in the hoop because either
yeah,
way, I'm not coming
right.
out type thing. And so how do you early on? I know you mentioned kind of making yourself vulnerable, sharing some of those stories. What are some of the other ways, or what are some of the stories that you do share with them ultimately to build connection? Because I believe in like my industry, so to speak, is I think this is where so many people make the mistake is they come into a room with a team and they just start teaching. And these kids
Yeah,
are like, I don't give a shit. Like there is no context, right?
yeah,
Or they show up, into the gym like with you and they're like, yeah, I know, like I signed here and everything, but
yeah.
I'm like, I'm just trying to go play and then make some money after this type thing. So how do you like what are stories and what are different ways that you do
Yeah.
build that connection?
I don't think coaches ask enough questions.
Oh yeah.
I think we try to teach and correct and manage and all of those words before we ask questions. So we ask a lot of questions. And we try to teach them how to think. And asking questions lets us know what they've been taught or what they think.
Mm-hmm.
We ask a lot of questions before we attack a situation. I look at it like the same in recruiting. Like sometimes you'll hear a coach, and I've done this before when I was an assistant early on. I've recruited a kid and I've said, "Hey man, you go with the ball in the hands. We're gonna play you at the point. We're gonna let you do this. We're gonna let you do this." And the kid didn't want to play point. I just assumed it. I never asked.
Uh,
So I think a lot of times society makes us think that this is what they want to hear or what they want. And I mean, why assume when you can know? So the way you go about that is asking.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Where do you that sparks a
It takes a lot
big
of time. It takes a lot of time.
yeah, yeah.
A lot of people don't want to invest the time to get to know them. So I think that a lot of student athletes now, especially in basketball, they're used to getting asked questions. They're good at Q&A
Mm-hmm.
because if you go on the AU circuit after they finish playing, they have a recruiting service guy who's asking them a lot of questions. So the way you build comfort with them is not just telling them what to do, is asking them questions so then you can attack the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that was going to kind of be like my next question, no pun intended, so to speak, is uh so many people today have been basically hardwired, like you just said, what to think versus how to think for
Right.
themselves. And
Right.
where in your experience, and maybe it's a multitude, maybe it's all across the board, is like where does most of that influence come from? Is it more parents? Is it more society? Is it more their friends? Is it more, in your case, AAU and like club type coaches? Where do you have to go in and kind of attack some of those preconceived beliefs and perceptions in the way that they see the world, that's been so hardwired into them? It's like, it's not wrong, but that served you up to this point.
Yeah.
Now we got to see the world a little bit differently.
I've just been a player, like you've been there before. And the stuff that they deal with is different than the stuff we've had to deal with.
Yeah.
Um, and I wouldn't know how to manage it. You know, it would be hard for me. And I tell them, I say, look, I'm gonna be honest, it'd be difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, kind of what we do is like after our first, you have a mandatory closed scrimmage every year by the NCAA. So obviously no stats get out, no film gets out, none of that stuff. So every year after the scrimmage, I make and film the next day, I make these guys bring their phones to film. I say, we had a scrimmage yesterday. What text messages did you get from family members, coaches, trainers, whoever it is, about that scrimmage?
Mm.
And then usually the first question is, did y'all win? Because nobody knows the score. You can't report the score.
Right.
The question is, how many points did you score?
Yeah.
And then it's like a low number is like, wow, or whatever. Or why didn't you play or whatever? So you got to get ahead. You got to get to problems before they become problems.
Right.
And then when they hear it the second time, they're like, okay, he did say this was coming. It's not going to eliminate them. It's going to help them navigate how to manage them.
Right. And how do you feel, like, because at some point you have to, it's kind of goes back to your shooting versus jogging on defense example. Like, how do you get them to be honest with that too? Right. Because if you've got a family member like, this is bullshit, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you were in, you'd
Yeah.
put up 20 a game or like whatever it is, versus like them being honest is like, well, yeah, but I was late 3 days in a row. And then I didn't, like, I haven't been
Yeah.
going to class and I haven't been doing well when it's like, because to me, it's like honesty is the foundation, right?
Yeah.
It's like that is the starting point. I got to be able to look in the mirror and I got to be able to tell you as a coach or my family or whoever of like what the reality of the situation is, because we're really good at lying to ourselves, especially guys. We'll jog 2.5 miles and somebody asks us how far we ran. We're like,
Yeah.
yeah, 3. Like, no, you didn't.
Yeah. We just tell them all the time, like, you got to separate your feelings from the truth.
Yeah.
Like, your feelings may be hurt that you didn't play. What is the truth of why you didn't play?
Yeah.
And that's hard to do.
Yeah.
That's really hard to do.
Especially as a man.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So how much of, I'm curious, since your first like your first coaching experience per se was getting to be around one of the all-time greats, right? Like how much of
Yeah.
like what you learned from like Coach Huggins has like spilled over into your personality and like how you develop athletes? Because I would assume that there's probably things that you carried over as a player too that he did, like in terms of like mentoring you and empowering you along, throughout your time at WVU. So what are some of those like big takeaways that have helped you?
I think the biggest thing planned for Hugs is you knew where you were, you knew where you stood. And not only did you know, the whole team knew.
Right.
I'm playing with Joe Alexander, who's the number 8th overall draft pick. and it wasn't a situation where Hugs would say, walk over to Joe and whisper and say, "Hey, we need you to shoot, or we need you to shoot." No, Hugs told everybody
Yeah.
Joe's shooting. So there's no like, I mean, there's no like, there's no blurred lines. Like
Right.
Joe's the guy.
Yeah.
And so you knew where you stood with them. Like every day in practice, it was like, okay, there's you run the team. It's his team. You run the team. Like you knew that. And then also the biggest thing that I probably learned from Hugs, and I carry it with me, is like he doesn't let players become failures. He
Hmm.
lets them fail, but he ain't gonna let you be a failure. So
Right.
for example, I've noticed, when I was GA for him, he would have some guys, after practice, guys kind of, you may have some guys working hard, doing their post game practice routine. You may have some guys shooting half court shots and goofing off. So I'm sitting there with them. I can't remember what player it was. I ain't gonna know his name if I did, but they were shooting, half court shots, whatever, not really working after practice. Probably should just went in the training room.
Right.
So Hugs didn't say anything. He said, "I'm not gonna say anything right now," but it bothered him. So then we had a game like the next day or 2 days later, and the one who was shooting half court shots shot poorly. So Hug says, if you took post practice seriously and actually worked on stuff you do in the game, you probably would have made a shot. So then it registered with him that
Right.
Hugs was watching and he was observing and he's paying attention. Another thing too is like, I think if Hugs would have said, "Hey man, go get your work in," would it sunk in as much?
Yeah. 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 I mean, you definitely would make the argument probably not, especially the way that people's their natural reaction is like, fists up, right? Like somebody
Right.
coming at it is to be on defense. It's like, we just worked out for 3 hours.
Yeah,
Like I'm
exactly.
good. I got my
Yeah,
work in. Like now I'm just
exactly.
enjoying myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What about like maybe like recruiting or like film or like non
Yeah.
coaching type things that you were able to take away with?
I just think like,
Because he's got to be good at building relationships.
yeah, he is. He's a great storyteller.
Mm,
A great storyteller. I think, and he's like that. John Beeline was like that. And I think anytime like you talk to players or anybody, if you can tell a story, um, I think it goes a long way. And a lot of things that he wanted us to do, there was a story behind it.
yeah. 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 I mean, that's it's even when I reached out to you that's 100% my belief is, I could get on this podcast, I could get on this show and, I've read all the books, I've paid for mentors, I've been around all the
Right.
coaches, right? And like
Right.
spew all the information out and they're like, okay, that's great. Versus like when
Right.
different people come on and tell their story of like just the whole half court thing. And they're like, oh, like that totally makes people can start to resonate that with
Yeah.
that, so much better because ultimately like he wanted that individual, that athlete to take an action. And there had to
Yeah.
be a story to actually move them versus going in there and telling them, like, hey, this is what you should do, or like, this is how you should
Right.
live. Right. Like, yeah, I totally agree. That like empowers everybody. What's some of the big differences? And it could be even like from teams that you've coached now to teams that you've played on
Yeah.
college, high school, AAU, like whenever, what for you are some of those like key elements that differentiates what I call like an average team or like a championship team? What are some of those just small things that
Yeah.
coming in now, like as a head coach, it's like, man, like
Yeah.
it's these one or two like little ingredients and we get everybody rowing in the same direction. We don't just get incremental results. We start to exponential results and really start to perform.
How I think the biggest thing is, how do you create extra possessions for your team?
Okay. Yeah.
Whether it's forcing turnovers. Since I've been here, we've been around number one or number two pretty much every year in forcing turnovers in the league. Um, and year one we turned it over a lot, so it was kind of a tie. But last year
Yeah.
we did a better job of not turning the ball over. And I think the other difference maker is on the offensive glass. Um, we're kind of throwback team where we play two bigs. So we
Mm-hmm.
good job on the offensive glass. And I learned that from Hugs. It's not only what you teach, it's what you emphasize.
Yeah.
So, the year before Hugs got there, we emphasized shooting a lot of threes and not turn the ball over. We didn't really talk about rebounding as much. And that year before Hugs got there, we were like probably 250th in the country in rebounding. And then you fast forward to the year Hugs got there, we were like top 25 or top 30 in the country in rebounding with
Yeah.
the same guys. So we didn't have a magic drill. We didn't have a lucky rebound drill. It's just what we emphasized every day in every drill.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah, that's really fascinating. So was it more like,
Yeah.
was it almost like two different between those 2 years too, like defensively minded versus offensively minded, or was it a little bit of both?
Um, a little bit of both. Because it was funny because when Hugs got when he got the job, we had our first workout and he told one of the assistants, he said, you know what? I've never had this many guys that can guard. I mean, they can't guard. Because we was playing like that year before we played a lot of zone 1-3-1 and stuff like that. And he said, you know what? I've never had this many guys that can make shots either. So,
Yeah.
once our shot making and our skill set combined with his defense and toughness, we combined it and, we were really good.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, the ability to adapt, right? Like that's what makes like great coaches, great players, and everything. So, what are you now? And you can kind of go two different areas because um it seems like through this conversation too is like you're a coach that actually cares, right? Like, yes, we want to win, right? Like, but at the end of the day, it's how do I build this connection with them? How do I empower them? How do I share my story so that like if this happens whenever career choice time
Right.
comes, um, so when you're recruiting, what are those like elements in terms of a young man, a young adult, like that you're looking for? And then the same with like when you're building out your staff.
Right.
Like what are those elements in terms of like creating the culture that you're continuing to try to build there?
I think like the question when I got the job, I said, how do I create? I don't want to say culture because everybody says culture, and
Right,
then
right, buzzword.
yeah, and then it's like, oh, well, it took me 5 years to create my culture, and now my culture's in place, and then the next year you have a bad culture. I'm like, how do you create an environment every
Yeah,
single day? And if you have that environment every single day, then that's what your culture is.
right.
Problem is, we put stuff on the wall and say this is our culture, and then it's not lived. So
It
I
goes
think
back to
that
what you said before. It's not what you write down, it's what you tolerate.
right, right, right. And so yeah, my older brother's on my staff. He's one of my assistants. So like when I put my staff together, I asked myself, I said, who can I get in the car with in Radford, Virginia, and drive across the country to California and just have a great time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I put my staff together.
Nice.
Guys I could trust, you know, guys who are smart, guys who like really cared about kids as people.
Yep.
And those are the type of guys we have on our staff, and it's the type of people I want to attract. And then in the recruiting process, like I said, we ask questions. Like, and what I've done is over the years, like I've formulated like a whole bunch of questions that they asked at like the NBA combines. During the interview process, because that's a big part of
Right.
them paying a guy $6 million or them paying a guy $12 million is the interview process. So I think the NBA, NFL, professional, those people ask the best questions. So it used to be like you ask a gym teacher or his coach, "Hey, does so and so work hard?" And they're gonna say, "Yeah," but like, who are they comparing it to? Like, I thought I worked
Right.
until I heard Kobe Bryant stories. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
compared. So it's like then now you ask better questions. You ask a kid, you say, give me some examples of how hard you work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So now when that player says, I wake up in the morning, I usually get smoothie, oatmeal, I go to the gym, I make 500 mid-range jump shots, then I make this, I make that. They've had a plan, and you can't make up a plan on spur of the moment. At least a lot of them can't.
Right, right, right.
So then you understand that, then it helps you project out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. Throughout the summer is I'll get the opportunity to like speak at a lot of camps, and they're college camps, right? So it's these kids essentially, if you're at this camp, you probably somewhat want to go to this school, right? Like if you're paying
Right.
this money, like you want to get noticed in some type of way. And so I always ask them because they're like, oh, like what are we doing here? And I'm like, okay, it's simple. Like if this coach walked in this room right now and they asked you, I'll give you a full scholarship right now if I like your answer to this question. And the question is what value do you bring to this team or this program? Like, what would your answer be? And they're all just like looking at me. I'm like, don't you think that's like a really good like answer to like have in your toolbox?
Sure, for sure.
Because you're probably asking something in that world of like why am I here? Like what
Right.
like you tell me why I'm here. I know why I'm here, but you tell me why I'm here type
Yeah.
thing. And it's like so many young kids, young adults, it's like they've never thought about because the majority of their time, the majority of the time, it's the generic, right? Like, I'm committed, I'm engaged, I work hard, I'm focused. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
dude, there's 30 million players in the country vying for your spot, and you literally just sound like all them.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
So it's teaching them to, do you feel like even at, I guess this is once they get there, how to answer questions too, right? Like how the ability to stand out within your answers.
Yeah. And I think that we put them in a lot of positions where they have to communicate face to face. And I
Yeah.
think they're really, really good at communicating like behind the screen.
Yeah.
And so, it may be a situation where, they have to speak in front of their teammates or whatever. And, we just, and it's kind of spur of the moment. We just create those random situations where, they have to do it, where they get comfortable doing stuff like that.
Well, and then you get like you get the perk of too, because when they do that is like nonchalantly, they're building their own connection within themselves too, right? Like if they're honest, right? Like if there's I'm making this up, like tell me what your biggest fear is, right? And then people start to be honest, is like I'm scared of being judged. Like I feel like all the time it's like I wear what I think other people want me to wear, and then like three other people in the room like, damn, I'm kind of thinking the same thing a little bit too. And so there is a little like bonding moment, so to speak, within all that as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's fun. So how do you like, well, let's ask that. Like, what are ways that obviously you tell stories, you share like your beliefs and your perceptions of the world to help you connect with them. What about getting them to connect, right? Because I have a graph of there's 16 arrows and they're pointed all in different directions. And I'm like, this is what average teams do. Or you got like 16 arrows and they're all pointed up, right? Like, how do you get them rowing in the same direction? What are some of the
I
tools
think
that you have to pull out?
I think sometimes, so you have their own locker room. After practice they go down there. I think so. Sometimes we provide before practice. We give them an opportunity to talk, and like the coaches will leave. So
Nice. Yeah.
what I have now is I have a stuffed animal named and stuffed animal is an elephant, and the elephant's name is Truth. I actually have a player on my team this year named Truth, so we have two Truths. So anytime I feel like there's something going on with the team behind the scenes that like it just don't feel right, Truth to the
Right.
film session, and the elephant would just see. I'll put the elephant in one of the seats, and then they know they're like, okay, we don't have to talk today. So a lot of times, like our staff will leave and we'll say, y'all talk about anything bothering y'all, anything within this team, anything y'all need to address. And we'll be out on the court, you know, when y'all done. So I say, well, don't just sit in here and then think we're not going to practice. We're still going to practice.
Right.
But
Right.
guarantee we have a better practice after we iron out whatever issues y'all have within the team. Because I said, I can only manage so much. I can manage practice. A lot of times I can manage stuff during the day. But the biggest part is like when you guys are away, like when you're
Right.
in your dorms, apartments, whatever. That's when a lot of the stuff that can impact winning. That's when a lot of that stuff happens. So,
Yeah.
we think, and this is why I said, as much as we talk about basketball and trying to figure out ways to win as a staff, they don't do it as much as we would want them to do it. So
Mm.
we have to create that time for them to do it. Because if you say it, hey man, did you talk to so and so about, what he was going through in practice yesterday? They'll say, I ain't got a chance to see him. So now that chance to see him is right before practice and talk about it.
Yeah, that's powerful. It's with anything, right? Like if you, I mean, something as simple as is like write down your goals, right? Like if you don't block out the time, it's like, I
Right.
don't need to do that.
Right.
I got it
Right.
up here.
Right.
I can remember it. I'm like,
Right.
I don't think so. I don't think so. It's
Exactly.
funny. Do you have to reel in, like, because I was talking with, it was a business owner, and question is, do you have to reel them in with the hard work, like the reality of like they're not working as hard as they think they are, kind of like your Kobe Bryant story, or this business owner gave the example of like all you CEOs think that you're working hard. Let me put it in context. If you define hard work by like units of time by money, is last year Elon Musk made more money than Bill Gates has made in his entire life. So he's the hardest working one in the room, right? Like everybody in here that thinks like that's the hardest. So do you have to reel them
Yeah.
in of like the hard work that got you here? That's what got you here. Now, like there's levels to the game.
And also like how long have you been working hard?
Mm,
Sometimes I may approach a student athlete and say, hey man, you're not working hard enough. And then they work hard the next practice. And then we have a game the next day. I'm like, well, I worked hard. I'm like, well, so-and-so's been working hard for 6 months.
right, right, right.
And so it's just like, I don't know. And you get some situations where guys think they should be playing. And I'm like, okay, well, if you should be playing, then who do you sit? And then they say, I don't know if you should sit him. I'm like, well, somebody's got to sit.
They're not six out going out there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I don't. I just think like working hard. It's your standards. Like sometimes you can. Sometimes they don't know, so you have to show them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
And
it's
we educate them through film.
well, and it's what, like you said, like it's what they've been exposed to as well. They may be working hard, very relative to until you heard Kobe Bryant stories. It's like, well, hot damn.
And sometimes you have to, and sometimes if you don't see it, you don't know. Because we had a guy last year, and we were telling them, hey man, this is how pros are. The pros we've been around, they do this before practice. They do this during practice. They do this after practice. On their off day, they do this. So he gets with some pros on the Virgin Island national team. And I called him, I asked him how he's doing. He's like, man, these pros, man, they do this, they do that. So he was kind of educating me on the pros. And I said, well, I just told you that last year and throughout the whole year. So it's like once it's different until you see it
Yeah,
and when
yeah,
you
yeah,
get around it. So like he got around it and then he came back and he was like, acting like them.
yeah, yeah. Environment, right? Like you said, it's like how do we continue to create that environment on a day-to-day basis? Yeah, very fascinating. All right, last question. Okay, so here's the scenario, and then I'll give you like the reason
No.
why. So, like give you a little bit of time to like think about the answer. Is if you were in a stadium of 100,000 people and you could only deliver like one core message, like here's what my message is, like what would that be? So like for me is like if I got in front of everybody is I firmly believe like you're the creator of your life and you don't get what you want, you get who you are. Because a lot of people want the same things. A lot of people want college scholarships. A lot of people want to win a national title. A lot of people want one, but by math, most people fail. And the ones that usually typically have the highest success of winning to me is like they create the who. So that like literally you're just example. It's like I went down an experience and showed back and was living as a completely different person by what they were able to experience. And so it changed their their perspectives of the world, but ultimately it changed their identity. It changed the way they think, the way they act, the way they feel, their behaviors, their emotions, the whole nine. So if you could give your core message, what would that be?
I say it all the time. I'll say coach everything.
Mm,
And when I say everything, a lot of people think like, man, you talking about like offense, defense, special. Like, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like they're like a lot of people don't realize like coaching is teaching. So
yeah.
when I say coach, I'm talking about teach, like teach everything. So like too many times coaches focus on, man, I got to do this practice plan. I got to do the my practice plan's got to be perfect. It's got to be this. It's got to be this. This we're doing this for 3 minutes. But then you spend your whole day working on the practice plan and you never connected with your players.
Right.
So like if I'm helping one of my guys, talking to him about situation that I've been through that he may be going through, do you not think that guy's going to come to practice with a clearer mind and feel more connected with the team? So like we don't just coach them on the sport. We coach them on everything, related to life and experiences we've been through to help them, get to where they've been through. So that's what we always say. We got to coach everything.
Yeah, it's too is to like piggyback off that is I was working with a coach one time and this was a high school team. And one of the athletes came to me and he was just like, hey, like, just so you know, like me and my girlfriend, like we just broke up. So like I'm going into practice like
Yeah.
fuzzy headed, right? Like essentially. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I appreciate you like letting me know. And so I told the head coach and he was like, oh, these kids think they're going to get married. I was like, man, like you've been there too. You were 16 and you had a girlfriend and y'all thought y'all were getting married in high school
Right,
too.
right.
Like cut the man some slack, right? Like, and so it's like you said, it's like just the,
Yeah,
like the ability to like have that freedom to come to you and some of
yeah,
the similar, like I'm stressed out about school, like whatever it is, it could be a
yeah.
relationship or something going on at home. So I love that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing some of your stories. Enlightening everybody. I might steal that a little bit too of like coaching everything because I, to me as well, it's like as you grow the person, the athlete will grow, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, that's just kind of my belief. I think a lot of they get coaches and just people in general, they get so short-minded of like, oh, like I got to help them grow as an athlete, or I have to help them grow as a salesman, or I have to help them grow in this area. I'm like, man, like once they see themselves differently in the mirror, the game changes. The game
100%.
changes. So I appreciate it. Thanks again. And to all the audience out there, as always, hopefully you're able to get one thing out of it. The idea is to bring people on to share these stories so that you can find one thing that you can implement into your life and that hopefully will impact you the way that it's impacted me over the last like decade or so.